Hi kids, Pastor Josh here once again with your story for the week. Now, we're going to backtrack just a little today because the beginning of our story takes place just before Jesus is crucified. Now, after initially running away, two of Jesus' disciples, Peter and John, pluck up enough courage to sneak into the courtyard where Jesus is being tried to try to get news of what's going on. Now, the Sanhedrin is closed off from everybody, but there's usually a crowd of people in the courtyard, maybe huddled around a fire, just trying to get news or in case something comes up. Now, Peter and John are trying to keep a low profile. After all, they are disciples of Jesus. There's a chance they'll get arrested if anybody recognizes them. Unfortunately, Peter does get recognized. One of the serving girls in the area sees him and says, "Hey, weren't you one of the guys with Jesus?" And Peter, afraid, says, "No, not me. I have no idea who the guy is." But the girl doesn't let it go, and she turns to the other people in the group and says, "This is one of the guys who was with Jesus." And again, Peter says, "I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know the man." But then one of the others in the crowd says, "No, you've got to know him. We can tell from your accent that you're from Galilee, just like Jesus." And again, Peter says, "I swear I have no idea who this Jesus guy is." And right at that moment, he hears a rooster crowing. And as soon as he hears the rooster, he remembers something that happened earlier that night. While the disciples were on their way to the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus told them all how they would fall away, how they'd run away when he was arrested. Peter tried to argue that point, said he would never abandon Jesus. But Jesus told him, "Peter, before the cock crows, you will have denied 3 times that you even know me." And as soon as Peter remembers this, Jesus is brought out of the Sanhedrin, condemned to die. And so full of shame, Peter runs away. Now, you know what happens after that, kids. Jesus is tried, he's executed, and on the 3rd day he rises again. Now, after the women run into Jesus, they run to tell Peter and the other disciples. Again, Peter and John are the ones that get the news first. And as soon as they hear that the tomb is empty, they race for it. They've got to see this for themselves. John actually gets there ahead of Peter, but when he gets to the entrance of the tomb, he's afraid to go in. But Peter, he barges past John so that he can see for himself. And the tomb is empty, as are the burial clothes that Jesus was dressed in. But they don't know what to make of this. Unlike the women, they haven't seen Jesus for themselves just yet. They don't know whether or not they can believe that he's really back or if someone just came and stole his body. So they go back to the upper room where they had the Last Supper, along with the other disciples. Now, they're still afraid that someone's going to come and try to arrest them, so they lock the door. But while they're in that locked room, they notice a sweet smell, and then there's a bright light. And next thing they know, Jesus is in the room with them. They can't believe their eyes, but Jesus says, "It's really me, guys. You wouldn't happen to have anything to eat, would you?" Now, it's not so much that Jesus is hungry, but the dead don't eat. So he was trying to reassure them, "It's really me, guys. I'm really back." And he talks to them and he teaches them again. And this time, the disciples understand why Jesus went through everything he went through. It was all to save them, to save all of us. And about as quickly as he came, Jesus just vanished. Now, one of the disciples wasn't there that night. His name was Thomas. So when he meets up with the disciples again and they tell him this story, he says, "Yeah, right. As much as I want to believe you, I'm not going to believe a word of this until such time as I see him with my own eyes and I stick my finger in the wounds in his arms." A week goes by. And then again, all the disciples are meeting together, Thomas included this time. And again, they lock the door. And again, there's the smell and the light. And Jesus appears. He goes right up to Thomas and says, "Here's your proof, Thomas. Do you believe now?" Thomas never even tries to stick his finger in his wrists. He drops to his knees and says, "My Lord and my God." Jesus raises him to his feet and says, "You believe because you have seen, but blessed are those who believe and haven't seen." Now, a little while after this, Peter decides, "I'm going to go fishing." And Thomas, John, and a couple of other disciples say, "Hey, we'll go with you." Peter's just trying to figure out what he's supposed to do now. He was the leader of the disciples. Now, he's having to deal with the fact that he denied Jesus 3 times. He's as happy as any of the others that Jesus is back. But he doesn't know what his place is anymore. He doesn't know what his role is. He doesn't even know if he has the right to call himself one of Jesus' disciples anymore. So, he does what he does best in order to clear his head. He goes fishing. All night, Peter and his friends are out on the lake, and they catch nothing. Dawn comes and they start making for shore. When they get close, a guy on shore calls out to them and asks, "Have you caught anything?" And Peter replies back, "Not a bite all night." And then the man on the shore cries out, "Try the right side of the boat." And they figure, hey, what's it gonna hurt? So they cast their net on the right side of the boat. Almost instantly, it's near bursting with fish. 153 fish to be precise. More than that net should have been able to hold, but it held. And that's when they realize, hey, this isn't the first time we've been in a situation like this. Peter realizes the guy on the shore is Jesus. So Peter, he jumps right in the lake and makes a swim for shore, while the others tow the line of fish to shore. When they get there, they find Jesus tending a cook fire with bread and fish already. And he says, "Bring some of the fish you caught and we'll have breakfast." And that's exactly what the disciples do. And as they're sitting and eating, Jesus turns to Peter and asks, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "You know I do, Lord." And Jesus says, "Take care of my lambs." In a little bit, Jesus asks again, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "You know I do, Lord." And Jesus says, "Take care of my sheep." And one final time, Jesus asks, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter, a little hurt that Jesus has to ask the 3rd time, says, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And again, Jesus says, "Take care of my sheep." And Jesus gets up, starts to walk away, then turns around and says to Peter, "Follow me." Just like he did that first time when he called Peter. That's when Peter gets it. 3 times he denied Jesus, and now 3 times he's told Jesus he loves him. Jesus has reinstated him. he is definitely one of his disciples again, and it seems that Jesus intends to put him to work. Now that's where our story ends, but we've got a couple of pretty big lessons today. First, we learned from Thomas that those who believe without seeing Jesus are blessed. Unlike the disciples, we don't always get the opportunity to see Jesus, but he blesses us when we believe that he's there, even when we can't see him. And then from Peter, we learn that Jesus forgives. 3 times Peter said, "I don't even know Jesus." But then here, he gets reinstated and forgiven. Not only does Jesus make him a disciple again, but we learn from later on that Peter was made the leader of the disciples again. He was the first leader of the church that would be born from the followers of Jesus. So not only was he forgiven, but Jesus worked it out so that he would be used to the best possible effect. And the same is true for us. When Jesus forgives us and we turn our lives over to him, he will make sure that we can do the best possible job we can for him.